Those last two videos were pretty weird. These next stories are just plain scary. Alright, listen up. Love will save us. A cold evening that could only mean one thing for us. No cooking and a Netflix marathon. The snow was falling outside the window and we had the fireplace going. We'd just gotten married and it felt wonderful sharing the little miracles of everyday life with the person you chose to spend the rest of it with. I made the call for an extra cheese full-size pizza just for the two of us. Having cold pizza with coffee the next day is my favorite kind of breakfast. I think she feels the same way. The pizza place said it would be arriving in a little more than half an hour. We opened the red wine, set the table, lit the candles, and cuddled on the couch while the TV was blasting our favorite TV series of all time, How I Met Your Mother. Although we were trying to have the perfect evening, the night was going to take an unexpected turn in just a matter of minutes. That turn came when the bell rang. Pizza delivery people just don't ring your bell repeatedly like maniacs. On the contrary, it's usually a single, shy ring. That was the first thing that was odd about the delivery. The person on the other side of the door rang and rang repeatedly until I opened up. He was in very bad condition. He looked like he'd just been robbed. For starters, he was barefoot in the snow. Secondly, he had no jacket and was shivering, freezing in short sleeves. Finally, his clothes looked dirty and kind of torn apart. But what struck me the most was the look in his eyes. He looked desperate, truly desperate. He asked me if he could come inside. It was freezing cold, so I didn't doubt it or ask my wife. I just invited him in, forgetting completely about the pizza. Once he was in, we invited him near the fire and asked him if he wanted me to call the cops or the pizza place. He replied we could do that in a minute and asked me if I had anything hot to drink because he was freezing. I got up and went to the kitchen to fix him some coffee, leaving them in the other room. That was a big mistake on my side. But I'd been a pizza delivery guy myself during my college years. I was trying to pay for my education and my living expenses with that money. So I thought that what happened to that guy, whatever it was, could have happened to me. I made him a big mug of hot black coffee, but he never received it because it all fell on the ground as I entered the fireplace room. My wife was tied down, with her face looking down into the pillows. I heard the sound of air moving, and the next thing I saw was the floor. When I woke up, both of us were tied down in my empty tub. My vision was blurry, and I felt acute pain on the left side of my head. He must have hit me very hard with something. She was still gone, passed out. I could see she was breathing, but her eyes were closed. Suddenly, the bathroom door opened and he made it in, wearing my finest suit and smoking a cigar, a Cuban cigar from my studio. He looked at me with a big smile. His eyes were no longer of a victim, they were full of fire. I was angry, very angry, but also very scared. I had a piece of cloth in my mouth, so he was the one doing the talking. Relax, my friend, I'm not going to hurt you. We can just spend a nice, cozy weekend together and then I'll set you free. Don't worry, I'm not dangerous. Well, unless you make me angry. But you'll be a good boy, won't you? He then shut the door and left. I had my hands tied behind my back and a piece of cloth in my mouth. She woke up and, together, we removed our mouth protection by rubbing each other's face. It would have been very romantic in a different set of circumstances. Once we were free to talk, she whispered, "We can't be like this the entire weekend. He's going to kill us. We have to do something." To be honest with you, I was completely helpless. Somehow in my mind, there was nowhere to run and nothing to do. Lucky for me, I married a woman who could take us both out of there. We had to look for the cloths and bite them again when we heard him coming up the stairs. He opened the door wide open violently and stared at us. He was no longer wearing my finest suit, but her fanciest dress, complete with the bijou and the high heels. "I look better in this than you do, don't I, dear?" As soon as he left, she got up and pulled the curtain down, including the pole. Next, she opened the window above our heads using her forehead, and both of us managed to extend the pole out and make it stay there by closing the window. Someone should see it from the street, maybe a neighbor, and call the cops. The curtain moved in the frozen wind like a big white flag. It was our only hope. We sat down again. 2 full hours might have gone by until the bathroom door opened up again. This time, he was wearing my raincoat, kitchen gloves, and my rain boots. He had a big knife in his hand. I saw death in his eyes as he moved forward. The grin to one side was that of a small child ready to play with his new toy. "Do you want to play with me?" I said I wasn't going to hurt you, but I lied. I'm a mean boy. This will hurt a lot, but won't last long. Just when he took a step forward, we heard sirens approaching. The pole and flag worked. He stormed off but was caught in the act by the police. Later, we found out he was being chased for another 3 murders committed that same week, including the real pizza delivery guy that same evening. That night, our bond became stronger, and I knew when death approached me one step at a time that love would save us, and it did. The abandoned factory and the ghostly executives. There was something wrong with the car's clutch. I remember that very clearly. It'd been driving me insane for the entire shift. It was the pizza place's car. I was trying to make ends meet by working 2 jobs on the weekends. It was the end of my second shift of the day. All I wanted was to deliver those pizzas and get back home. I guess you know the feeling, a mix of urgency and laziness. I could already feel the sheets embracing me, but I had at least half an hour more of work to do. Well, that's what I thought anyway, but I couldn't be further away from the truth. That was a very, very long night for me. As I was saying, I was struggling with the beat-up car trying to get to my last delivery of the night. I hadn't been there before. That always feels kind of unsettling, especially on that side of town. We call it the forgotten side because it's full of empty houses. A huge factory went into bankruptcy, leaving behind a huge empty concrete building and a bunch of empty houses. People say it's haunted because of the big accident in the factory that killed the families of executives. Small town tales, you surely know the kind. Finding the house was very easy. It was the only one with a light on in the entire block. It was close to midnight, but in that neighborhood, it didn't mean people were sleeping. It meant empty houses. I drove all the way to the parkway and sent a message to a friend at work. "I'm here, man. This place is so sketchy. Call me in 10 just to make sure." As soon as I got his reply, I got out of the car, leaving my cell phone inside. I was holding 5 pizzas with one hand and ringing the bell with the other. I could hear loud music inside and some muffled voices. It looked like a party. I stood there. My hand below the pizzas was getting hot and tired. I was going through the same process. I must have rung the bell at least 10 times before someone came to the door. The man who opened it was tall and pale. He looked like an executive of a big firm dressed in a smart suit with a perfect tie. Inside, the house looked cozy, and all the guests were dressed as rich people. I wondered what they were doing in such a run-down neighborhood. "Hey, pizza guy, come on in, have a beer," he said with a big smile. I said no with my head and murmured the price. He replied, "Hey man, why so serious? Come on, give yourself a break, have a beer with us." I said no again, but this time I said it out loud. That's when things started getting a little weirder. "Hey everyone, listen up, cut the music. Mr. Pizza Boy here doesn't think we're cool enough to hang out with him. He won't have a beer with us." I smiled at the big guy and said it was my last delivery and my second job of the day. I remember saying, "I just want to go to sleep, mister." He looked at me and his eyes somehow changed. He said, "Nobody's gonna sleep here, boy. That includes you." He came one step closer to me and said very slowly, "I think you should come in if you know what's best for you, pizza boy." My entire body was paralyzed by fear. I must have been like that for a minute. As soon as the adrenaline kicked in, I tossed the pizzas at him and ran to the car as fast as I could. It wasn't locked and the keys were in the ignition. I knew this was a sketchy place. He came running after me, and in my rush, I forgot about the clutch. The reverse just wouldn't go in. I was so desperate, I lost control of the car and it just drove itself into the steel doors in front of me. The airbag was engaged, and I was suddenly trapped between a white balloon and the seat inside a stalled car surrounded by hostile strangers. Things didn't look good, and they were not getting any better. I decided to get out of the car. It was surrounded by the time I made it out. The tall man was staring at me with a look that would have made Stanley Kubrick proud. I thought that was the end. Death was standing in front of me. That's when I said it, just naturally, as if nothing happened. "One beer, okay? It's been a long day." Suddenly, everyone's face changed to a smile. "Now we're talking, pizza boy," said the tall man. Then he asked me to follow them inside the house. As soon as he turned his back to start walking, I stormed off in the opposite direction. I must have run at least 2 miles before looking back. I guess nothing gives you more stamina and energy than fear, and believe me, I was very afraid. By the time I made it back to the pizza place, around 4 in the morning, the police were waiting for me next to my friend. I explained the entire sequence to them. We went to fetch the car the next day during daylight and with the police. To my surprise, the car was intact, but the house was empty, and it looked like it'd been that way for years. What I had seen the day before seemed like a bad dream. To this day, I still wonder if I was just so exhausted I was delusional, or if the tall man really existed. I quit the next day and took a job mowing the lawn at a baseball stadium instead. It's boring, but at least I didn't find any ghosts there. Little Johnny and the Rockstar Pizza Delivery Guy. The flickering light to my right was annoying. I was sitting at a desk doing the paperwork for the delivery company I worked for. We delivered mostly pizzas and sodas. That night, business had been quite slow. That's why I was back there instead of riding my motorcycle. Don't get me wrong, I preferred the bike. It's just that, well, everybody preferred the bike. So I was back there doing numbers and being annoyed by the flickering lamp on that old desk. The door opened and my boss said, "Boy, you're on. We have a far one. I know you love to ride far. You want to take it? It's up in the hills." I put the pen I was playing with down and grabbed my leather jacket on my way out. My motorcycle looked kind of ridiculous with the delivery box behind it. It was a black Honda Shadow with shiny chrome accessories. It was ready to go through hell and face the never-ending road. Yet I transformed it into the motorcycle version of a Honda Civic. That means I took its dark spirit and turned it into a harmless Sunday morning vehicle. Well, delivering pizzas paid the bills and paid for the bike, so I just decided to enjoy the open road. I loved getting paid for going up the hills. It's a scenic road. You can see the entire valley from there. The lights multiply as far as the eyes can see, and it all looks like this velvet blanket full of shiny diamonds. Beautiful. Speaking of beauty, the house I arrived at was gorgeous. Old and spooky, but stunningly elegant nonetheless. I walked up the stairs to the impressive main door and rang the bell. The night was completely silent, dead silent. A man in his 30s opened the door. He didn't match the house at all, dressed in a sweatshirt and shorts. Right away, I noticed he had some blood stains on his white sweatshirt. His face was entirely red and he was panting. I was standing there with my leather jacket, my boots, and black jeans. He looked at me again and said, "Hey, you don't look like a delivery guy." I nodded. I got that a lot. I looked like a rock star and felt like a rock star, but I had to pay my bills. Suddenly, I heard a loud thump in the back of the house upstairs. Then another thud and a scream, creepy enough to make me take a step back. He looked in and at me again and said, "Sorry, I don't know where my manners are. Please come in, it's freezing outside." I don't like going into people's houses. I mean, you never know what you're walking into. But this guy seemed harmless, so I walked in and took off my backpack to deliver the order and collect the money. I extended the bill to him. I had a small brother who suffered from schizophrenia and committed suicide in his teens, so I recognized some drugs. There were heavy sedatives in a large quantity on the table. Whatever it was these people wanted to calm down, it was very, very mean. He asked me to take a seat as he fetched the money upstairs. I sat down at the kitchen table. Then, another thump and another scream made me get up from my seat and move toward the door. Right then, I felt a circle pushing against my back. "I'm sorry I have to do this, but I can no longer handle the situation by myself. It's completely out of control. You're gonna have to help me." I then understood he was pointing a gun at me. I replied, "Or else," but he just remained silent and forced me to walk. He ordered me to put some sedatives on the pizza before going upstairs. One of the doors in the upstairs corridor had 3 big iron locks, as if it were protecting a vault. He said what I feared he would, "Open the door, please." I was reluctant, but heard the sound of the gun's hammer going into position. What I saw inside was scarier than the gun, the house, and every horror movie I'd ever seen. I mean, I love satanic music and heavy metal, but I'd never seen anything like that in my entire life. In front of me, a creature, a boy, half human and half beast, looked at me. I could see the fragility in his eyes behind the matted, greasy hair. "I brought you a friend to feed you, Johnny. It's cheese pizza, your favorite." The kid was behind a see-through wall with a small door. I was scared to the bones, shivering while crouching and cutting a slice of drug-filled pizza to give to that kid. His eyes were something I could never forget. He had the tenderest, most honest look, but his body was big, hairy, and he wouldn't speak but squawk and roar. As soon as he ate 2 slices, he fell asleep on the floor, snoring loudly. I said out loud, "Are we done here? Can I leave?" The guy tipped me $2,000 and asked me to keep it between us. He said he was sorry for the whole gun thing. After that episode, I fed pizza to Johnny every week for 2 months and made 16 grand in tips. That was until I saw him hitting Johnny with a stick because he wouldn't eat. That very night, I called the police and told them all about the room and the kid. The cops took the guy under charges for abuse and little Johnny to a special facility for treatment and observation. I have to say, every time I jump on the bike, I have a Harley now, and go for a ride in the hills, little Johnny's eyes come to me. I hope you're okay, boy, wherever you are.